Dozens of Russian armored vehicles were destroyed within hours as Ukrainian FPV drones and precision artillery broke apart an advance that Moscow believed could open a fresh line of attack. This sudden wave of losses shocked many observers because the assault collapsed far faster than in recent clashes across the Eastern Front. Russian infantry and armored teams had moved into a forest corridor to create a local breakthrough. Yet Ukrainian reconnaissance drones spotted the formation before it could settle into firing positions. Ukrainian operators launched strike drones in quick succession, and although the first hits failed to lock onto their targets, the following waves struck key vehicles and forced Russian units to scatter through dense trees and damaged structures. The pace of the response showed how modern warfare now revolves around timing and live coordinated intelligence rather than pure firepower. This confrontation may influence the next stage of Ukraine's defense lines because it reveals how Russia continues searching for weak points while Ukraine relies on a growing drone network to shut down those attempts at the earliest moment. The unanswered question is direct and troubling. What caused Russian troops to retreat so quickly? And why did their reinforced armor systems fail at a moment when they needed protection the most? The details of the battle offer a clearer look at how this turning point formed and why it matters for the wider fight. The first stage of the battle began when Ukrainian reconnaissance drones detected a new Russian movement inside a dense forest corridor, and this early warning shaped every decision that followed. Ukrainian operators observed a narrow line of infantry and light armored vehicles moving under the trees, and the spacing of the formation suggested that Russia wanted to slip through the area before defenders could respond. The Russian units advanced with careful steps because they relied on terrain to hide their intentions. Yet the benefit of cover disappeared the moment the Ukrainian drone feed revealed their exact direction of travel. Ukraine reacted the instant the column became clear on screen, and the choice to launch FPV drones without delay created strong pressure before Russian troops could organize defensive positions. The first FPV teams pushed toward the forest with the goal of interrupting the rhythm of the Russian approach, and the rapid deployment forced the attackers to change their pace almost immediately. The initial drones reached the trees while Russian vehicles were still adjusting their distance from one another, and the sudden appearance of incoming threats forced soldiers to look for cover rather than continue their advance. This hesitation weakened the forward momentum because armored groups rely on smooth communication in tight terrain, and even a brief pause can expose them to new angles of attack. Ukrainian commanders maintained the tempo by sending another wave of FPV drones into the area, and this second group moved faster because the first strikes had already caused the Russian line to lose its shape. The renewed push made Russian infantry break formation and spread into the woods, and this reaction reduced their ability to protect the vehicles that were supposed to lead the advance. Ukrainian operators used this window to scan for vulnerabilities, and the constant pressure from above prevented Russian teams from forming a stable perimeter around their armored assets. The Russian units were forced into a defensive mindset, even though they had planned an offensive action, and this shift in attitude allowed Ukraine to influence the engagement from the opening minutes. The fast drone response stood out because it prevented Russia from placing heavy weapons in firing positions, and the attackers could not anchor themselves to the ground or build firing lanes through the trees. Ukrainian forces understood that the forest corridor offered only a short opportunity for Russia to break through, and this awareness pushed them to escalate drone activity as soon as the threat appeared. Every FPV strike forced Russian troops to slow down or change direction, and each change created new openings for Ukrainian teams to push deeper into the contested zone. The Russian column never reached the point where it could stabilize because Ukrainian drones controlled the pace, and the lack of stability prevented the attackers from coordinating their infantry with their vehicles. This early collapse of momentum shows how drones now shape the battlefield by controlling the first moments of contact, and Ukraine used this advantage to keep Russian forces on the defensive. In a fight where drones decide when and where contact begins, does swift action outweigh heavy weapons, or does the result depend on how quickly each side can adapt under pressure? The clash began the moment Ukrainian infantry and APCS moved into the forest, and their advance turned a cautious standoff into a chaotic close-range fight. The first FPV drone launched by Ukraine missed its target yet forced the Russian formation to break apart, and this reaction interrupted the timing that Russian troops needed to secure a stable front. The sudden need to spread out changed how the Russian column behaved, because soldiers could no longer stay close to the armored vehicles that were supposed to guide the push through the trees. Ukrainian commanders understood that this hesitation opened a narrow window, and they sent armored carriers directly toward the forest line to pressure the Russian units before they regained control. The APCs moved forward with infantry walking beside them, and this combined movement increased the weight of the Ukrainian approach because it brought protected firepower and mobility into the same narrow space. The forest terrain limited visibility for both sides, and this made every movement more dangerous since neither group could rely on long-range support to hold the edge. Ukrainian infantry pushed deeper into the tree line while drone operators positioned above them, and the coordination created a layered attack that forced Russian squads to react in several directions at once. The second FPV drone reached its mark and destroyed a Russian armored vehicle, and this hit disrupted the center of the advance because the vehicle had been key to maintaining the speed of the assault. The loss of that vehicle forced Russian infantry to scatter again, and the break in formation weakened their ability to cover each other when Ukrainian troops moved closer. The forest began to fill with smoke and dust as rifles and machine guns opened fire from multiple angles, and the noise of battle erased any sense of order inside the narrow corridor. Ukrainian infantry used the trees to move between firing positions while APC gunners watched for sudden bursts of Russian fire, and this teamwork allowed them to push forward without losing momentum. Russian soldiers tried to regroup near fallen branches and natural cover, and they attempted to create short defensive pockets to slow the Ukrainian advance. The terrain made these defensive pockets unstable, because small teams could not hold a fixed line for long when they were cut off from their supporting vehicles. Ukrainian units kept shifting their angles of pressure, and each shift reduced the room Russia had to organize a stable counterattack in the forest. Drone operators continued to monitor the tree canopy and identified Russian attempts to form a new axis of fire, and this real-time coordination stopped the attackers from resetting the pace of the fight. As the APCs moved deeper into the woods, they became platforms that allowed Ukrainian troops to maintain steady fire and control the central path. And this control gave them an important advantage in the dense terrain. Russian infantry responded with bursts of automatic fire to hold their positions, and this created pockets of fierce engagement where small distances decided who advanced and who fell back. The forest restricted movement so sharply that both sides were pushed into close quarters, and this type of combat increased the pressure on soldiers because threats appeared with little warning. The drift of smoke and broken branches made visibility even worse, and every step forward carried the risk of meeting another burst of fire at only a few meters. Ukrainian units kept the initiative by moving as a coordinated group rather than isolated squads, and this discipline allowed them to press deeper, even as the Russian line continued to weaken. The fighting in the forest raised a question that many viewers will debate because the terrain shaped every action in this stage of the battle. Who holds the real advantage in close-range forest combat? The side that pushes with speed or the side that tries to hide within the trees? The moment Russian artillery opened fire on the advancing Ukrainian line, the rhythm of the battle shifted, and the clash moved from the forest floor to a contest of detection and timing across several layers of the battlefield. Russian crews tried to break the Ukrainian push by striking the route that infantry units were using to move forward, and the shells were meant to force the Ukrainian force to halt before their armored carriers gained more ground. The barrage created pressure on the Ukrainian advance because every impact risked cutting the connection between the troops inside the forest and the units preparing to support them from the rear. Ukrainian operators did not wait for the Russian batteries to finish their attack, and they launched reconnaissance drones to locate the exact points where the guns were firing. The drones moved above the tree line and followed the direction of the blast signatures until they found the Russian artillery site. And this rapid process allowed Ukrainian gunners to prepare a counterstrike. Ukrainian artillery units activated as soon as they received the coordinates, and their rounds were directed toward the Russian position with the intention of shutting down the fire that threatened the infantry in the forest. The strikes forced the Russian crews to abandon their firing rhythm, and the impacts created confusion among the teams responsible for loading and aiming the guns. The Ukrainian barrage continued to hit the area around the Russian battery, and the pressure from repeated strikes limited the ability of Russian gunners to maintain the steady fire needed to stop the Ukrainian advance. The destruction of that artillery position carried heavy consequences for Russia, because the battery had been responsible for supporting the ground units that were trying to attack through the forest. The loss of support left Russian infantry more exposed, and the distance between the forest and their remaining artillery made it harder for them to receive the quick-fire missions they needed to recover momentum. Ukrainian commanders treated the engagement as part of a larger chain of actions, and each link depended on the ability of reconnaissance drones to find threats before they caused serious damage. The use of drones to guide artillery created a fast connection between detection and strike, and this connection turned the counterattack into a direct challenge to Russia's ability to control the pace of the battle. The Russian crews attempted to reorganize under the pressure, and scattered members of the battery tried to pull back equipment that had not yet been damaged. But the continued hits made the effort difficult. The damage to the gun line weakened Russia's influence over the wider battlefield, because the artillery had been a key part of the plan to slow Ukrainian infantry and prevent their armor from moving deeper into the contested area. The Ukrainian side gained valuable time after suppressing the Russian guns, and the infantry in the forest were able to continue their operations without the same level of overhead threat. The drone-guided response also demonstrated how quickly modern kill chains can form when both sides rely heavily on sensors and rapid communication. And this moment showed how Ukraine uses unmanned systems to create fast precision strikes. Ukrainian forces gained a clear advantage when their FPV units destroyed another Russian armored vehicle. And this strike was especially important because the target carried the new cage armor that Russian crews had hoped would block drone attacks. The cage structure looked heavy and complicated, and it wrapped around the top of the vehicle in a way that suggested the designers wanted to stop drones from hitting the engine or turret. Yet the second Ukrainian FPV still reached the weak point and delivered enough force to disable the machine. The moment the blast hit the upper section of the vehicle, the Russian crew understood the armor would not hold, and they abandoned the machine before it became a trap in the middle of the field. The crew moved toward a group of damaged buildings on the edge of the forest, and this rapid retreat showed how dangerous the area had become once Ukrainian drones began circling for follow-up shots. The failure of the cage armor exposed a larger problem for the Russian approach because the design focused on blocking a single direction of attack, yet the FPV came in at an angle that the plates could not stop. Ukrainian operators used this moment to guide more drones into the area, and they sent them along the same route to test whether any other armored vehicles were moving behind the damaged one. The strike created a chain reaction in the Russian formation because the vehicles that followed had to slow down, and each delay increased the chance that Ukrainian drones would find them before they could cross the forest entrance. The collapse of movement disrupted the Russian plan to use the armored line as a spearhead, and the infantry behind the vehicles no longer had the protection they needed to continue pushing forward. The Ukrainian side understood the value of hitting vehicles that carried the new armor because every destroyed machine reduced Russia's confidence in the protective upgrades that had taken time and resources to produce. FPV operators continued to scan the tree line for any sign of Russian forces trying to recover equipment, and the drone feeds showed how fragments of the cage armor had fallen away from the vehicle after the explosion. The damage revealed that the armor layers were not evenly reinforced, and the FPV found the section where the plates were thinner, which allowed the warhead to penetrate and reach the main body of the machine. The destroyed machine sent a message to the remaining Russian troops in the area because the FPV had defeated both unarmored vehicles earlier and now a vehicle that included one of Russia's newest defensive upgrades. Russian infantry tried to reorganize near the ruined buildings, and they attempted to find a way to re-enter the forest without coming into direct drone view. But the open terrain around the damaged vehicle made it difficult. The Ukrainian push gained momentum because the removal of another armored vehicle freed their infantry to continue advancing with fewer obstacles, and the drone teams prepared for new targets that might appear along the same route. Do you think Russia can improve this armor design to stop FPV drones more effectively, or has the battlefield already moved past the limits of this kind of protection? Russian reinforcements reached the area soon after the armored vehicles were lost, and their arrival turned the fight into a long, intense, close-range battle that stretched across the tree line and the damaged buildings. The new Russian units tried to regain momentum by spreading out and pushing through the broken structures, and they attempted to use the narrow paths to block Ukrainian soldiers from advancing deeper into the zone. Ukrainian troops understood that stopping this wave quickly was critical for holding the ground they had just secured, and they called for artillery support to halt the Russian movement before it could take shape. The artillery fire landed in a tight pattern that limited Russian mobility, and it forced several groups to retreat into underground shelters and small bunkers that were left behind from earlier fighting. These groups used the cover to slow Ukraine's advance, and they fired from hidden positions to delay every Ukrainian step. Yet the lack of coordination made it hard for them to hold any steady line. Ukrainian commanders saw that the Russian reinforcements had no armored protection left in the area, and they pressed the advance because the artillery strikes created gaps that allowed infantry to move within safe distances. As the pressure increased, some Russian fighters withdrew in small teams, and they left behind weapons and damaged equipment in the ruins because the situation became too chaotic for an organized fallback. Ukrainian troops pushed deeper into the defensive points, and they focused on removing any Russian presence that could support a second counterattack once the artillery fire ended. Special Forces units joined the operation when the front line became stable, and they moved with small squads that advanced through each building with careful coordination so they could avoid unnecessary losses in close quarters. The units supported the advance because the structures were too damaged for heavy vehicles to enter safely, and the infantry needed well-trained soldiers to handle the hidden firing points inside the rubble. The teams marked each cleared structure and moved to the next one once they confirmed no Russian fighters remained, and they captured several soldiers who had stayed behind, hoping the battle would shift again. These captures showed that some Russian troops continued resisting despite being cut off, and they tried to survive inside small hiding spots until they were discovered by the clearing squads. The operation grew more complex as Ukrainian troops approached the deepest parts of the ruined zone, and the darkness inside collapsed rooms made every step uncertain, which slowed the speed of the advance. Still, the combined pressure from artillery, infantry, and special forces left Russia with no path to recover the ground they had just lost, and the clearing process allowed Ukraine to restore full control over the immediate area. The final question remains for many observers. Do you think clearing actions inside damaged urban zones are more dangerous than open field battles where visibility is higher and units can move more freely? Ukraine's swift mix of drones, artillery, and coordinated infantry has once again shown how modern battles now turn on reaction speed and precise timing. And this clash revealed how a Russian advance can collapse before it even forms a stable line. One of the most important details remains the failure of Russia's new protective cages that were designed to stop drone strikes, because the repeated FPV hits cut through these layers and left the vehicles exposed at the exact moment they needed protection. Yet this moment is only a small part of a wider fight that continues to evolve, and both sides are adjusting their tactics as new weaknesses appear with every clash. Some believe Russia may answer with heavier formations or new counter-drone tools, while others think Ukraine will push its drone network even further to keep control of the kill chain, though none of these paths are certain as the front keeps shifting. The key question now is simple and open. Will Russia find a way to slow Ukraine's drone advantage, or will Ukraine extend this momentum into the next stage of the fighting? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force to follow the latest updates.